This is one of those teams I've been overly excited to talk about this season. You may be thinking to yourself, the Georgia Bulldogs are going to be an easy win on your schedule this season. But as fans in Athens will tell you, this is a much improved Bulldog team this year. Maddie, it's year 2 under Mike White, and Georgia has brought in the number 16 recruiting class of the country, the number 6 transfer class in the SEC. There's a lot of new faces on this Georgia team. Do you see a chance for the Bulldogs to make it in March this season?
Absolutely. I am super high on this Georgia Bulldogs team this year. As you mentioned, a lot of new faces, great transfer class. I think Mike White is going to do great things with this program this year, and I fully expect to see them, if not in the NCAA tournament, at least in the NIT, and I'm going to enjoy watching them play in March.
I love it. I'm excited to talk about the Dogs. You're excited to talk about the Dogs. And this has been an incredible turnaround they're undergoing. We've got Tyler from Glory UGA here to talk with us today on the Hoops Southbound Show.
The Tennessee Volunteers are going to the Sweet 16.
Florida takes its place in history. Back-to-back and unforgettable.
Three-pointer on the way. No good. Close with the dunk at the buzzer. It goes and Arkansas wins.
And the Kentucky coronation is complete.
This is the Home Field Apparel Studio, where you can find great new threads to support your team at Home Field. They know college. Check them out today and use promo code Variety Sports. Our guest today, talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, is Tyler Graves from Glory UGA. How you doing today, man?
Doing great, man. Glad to be here. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely. Real brief, I want to ask you what your thoughts are on the Dogs this year.
I'm cautiously optimistic, and I feel like that's about as high as I can go right now. I think that this is the best roster Georgia has had in a couple of years. I would say 5-6 years minimum. I think they have a shot to do something. I don't want to put it out there in the world and just completely curse the Dogs. I think they have a shot to do something they haven't done in a long, long time, potentially make the NCAA tournament. I'm not ready to go there yet. I need to see the product on the court, but I feel like the pieces are starting to come into place. A lot of transfers that have come in, and that can be really great because you can get a lot of new talent really quickly, but it can also be a work in progress in the season when you're working a lot of new players in. So I'm very optimistic, but certainly cautiously so.
I can totally get it. So allow me to put that curse on you real fast here, because we're going to be playing a little bit of buy of BS. Maddie and I are going to throw a couple of quick prompts at you and let us know if you're buying it or, BSing it, much like buy or sell. And feel free to give us a free explanation if you don't mind. This season will be the best Georgia team since the 2016-2017 season.
I'm buying that for sure. There's been a couple of teams where I thought the Georgia had a chance to maybe make some noise into the tournament. And, the latter years of the Mark Fox era, Georgia was good, always good, solid team, but never quite good enough. And we were always waiting to get over that hump. And that's ultimately why Georgia decided to cut ties with Mark Fox. It wasn't that he was necessarily doing anything wrong, just wasn't quite getting the types of players needed there to take Georgia to that next level. You bring in Tom Crean, you have a lot of expectations, hopes based on, obviously he had some high profile misses, but also had a lot of success at the high major level. And we're hopeful there. And he brought a lot of energy in the program. Who were buying in because we wanted to buy in, but it never really translated onto the court. And here comes Mike White from Florida and immediately turns things around in year one, a 10 game increase in wins from Tom Crean's final year to Mike White's first year. And so now not only do we have the energy, but we also have tangible evidence on the court. We have proof of concept that he can actually take this team, not to the tournament yet. We haven't seen that yet, but at least take this team and improve dramatically in year one and maybe, hopefully, possibly take that step in year two.
Absolutely. There's a lot of excitement going around. I think probably like a year ago, everybody was kind of going, really? They hired Mike White? And now things just 100% just feel better there around Athens.
Yeah.
Maddie, do you want to do the next buy or BS?
Yeah, so our next one we have for you, Tyler, is Silas DeMary Jr. will be the best freshman on the Bulldogs team this season.
Oh, that's tough. I'm probably going to buy that. The guy I would watch out for. All right, Mari Jordan's going to be really good too. He's another really good player. The guy that wasn't necessarily more of a later addition to the class, Blue Kane. Incredible name, by the way. Just love the name.
Oh, it's the best.
Yeah, incredible name. But this guy gives Georgia something that they didn't really have much of last year, and that's outside shooting. And that's one of the things that has me cautiously optimistic about Georgia this year. Is I think that in general, Mike White went and addressed a lot of Georgia's deficiencies last year, whether it was size, defense. Certainly shooting was a major problem. I mean, 2 lead guards last year, both shot under 30% from 3. One shot 26, one shot 29%. That's not good enough. And Blue Cane's not going to start. I don't expect that to happen. But to have another guy off the bench in addition to Jabri Abdur-Rahim to come off and actually, spark the offense and hit some threes, threaten defenses from distance, that's huge. So he's a different kind of player, maybe more of a specialty player early on. So maybe Silas is going to be that guy. Probably, I would say Silas. But I think Blue Cane, with that special skill that he has, that one thing that he can do really, really well right now, might get him on the court and see a lot of minutes early in this season.
I like it. That's a great take.
So you're taking it like at a discount.
Yeah. Let's take it. I like that. At a discount. Yeah.
There we go. That's how we put the asterisk in there. That's 2 really good freshmen. I totally agree. It's hard to pick between those 2. All right. So now I'm going to curse you here. Georgia will make the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2015.
Put me on the spot, man. I want to buy this so badly. I do so badly. Let's do it. Let's just buy it. I'm going to buy it right now. I think that Mike White has really gone and addressed the areas that Georgia struggled in last year. I mean, there were some bright spots, and the roster, to me, in my opinion, we'll see it play on the court, is clearly upgraded. And if this team won 16 games last year, not good enough, 500, but again, massive step from where we were Tom Crean's final year to Mike White's first year, and he's upgraded the roster in year 2, and he's got a system established, his culture's more established. He does have some veterans returning who can kind of help bridge that gap. I think Georgia has a legitimate shot. So what? Georgia needs to get at least 20 wins, probably. It has to win the right games, obviously. But with the non-conference schedule that Georgia has put in place, there are opportunities, not just in the SEC, but also in the non-conference, to get some of those signature wins that could put them in the conversation come season's end. So can Georgia get 4 to 5 more wins and win a high-profile game or 2? I think there's a shot. So I'm going to say a better shot than not. So let's buy it.
I like the bot of optimism there. I'm with you.
No 100%. Guarantee, obviously. It's been a long time. Not guarantee anything, but again, cautiously optimistic. I think there's a shot.
I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair. I know I'm a little bit high on Georgia right now. I know Maddie and I have been talking about it all offseason, that we really like the direction the Dogs have been going under Mike White here. So there's a lot of reason to feel that optimism right now. And let's jump into, you're talking about the improvements in the roster. Let's talk about our players that we want to watch for the Bulldogs. Tyler, who's like the guy that you think, it doesn't have to necessarily be a superstar, but like a guy that you think Georgia fans need to pay attention to this year?
There's 2 guys that come to mind for me right off the bat, and they're both newcomers. I think Noah Thomason, the transfer guard for Niagara, is probably, if I had to guess right now, probably will lead the team in scoring. He's going to replace Kerry Oquindo as the lead guard. At least he projects to right now. He averaged almost 20 points, 19.5 points a game last year at Niagara. Was a big-time player for them. I know, obviously, that's a lower level. It's a mid-major, but I mean, so it will be a step up in competition, clearly. And sometimes that doesn't always work out. So it doesn't always translate, but sometimes it does. If you watch this guy's game, he's not like the most explosive player, the most dynamic player. I'm not going to suggest that he is, but he's a really crafty player that knows how to score. And that's something that Georgia was in a really short supply of last year. They simply didn't have a lot of guys that knew how to score. Had some really good athletes. Kerry Oquindo was as good of an athlete as there was in the entire conference last year. And I don't want to kill the guy. Didn't have a ton of game. And by that, I mean, he just didn't know exactly how to score. He didn't know how to take the talent, the athletic ability he had, and actually translate on the court and do things on a consistent basis. Noah Thompson is not the athlete Oquindo is. I certainly would not make that suggestion, but I think he knows how to score. He's better downhill. He's a crafty finisher on the rim. He's a pretty solid, thick body, so he can absorb contact and finish at the rim and convert those 3-point opportunities. And if you play off of him when he's trying to get to the rim, he also has the ability. He's not a knockdown 3-point shooter, but he shot close to 40%, about 38% last year at Niagara. So he has the ability to just pull up and hit that 3 in your face, which Georgia, again, was in short supply of last year. So I think he's the guy that I would watch for, kind of as that lead guard for the Dogs. I think he will likely lead the team in scoring. The other guy I would look at is RJ Sunahara, who, so maybe I'm gonna let you take that one. Is that the guy you had?
So the funny thing is that you said you picked 2 guys. It's funny because me and Maddie both picked one. She had Noah Thomason. I had
Okay.
RJ Sunahara. So
Yeah.
it's amazing how our brains just like,
There we go.
first time this has happened yet on this show.
Yeah, and the reason I went with Thomas and not Sunahara is it's the level of competition. I mean, it was, Sunahara is D2. So with Niagara, Thomas played Niagara. I mean, yeah, it's a lower level, it's mid-major, but it's still, it's still Division 1. But Sunahara, I mean, D2 player of the year last year. Hard to get better than that in D2. I know it's D2, but it's about as good as it gets in D2. I like the guy's body, 6'8". I mean, he's like a forward body with guard skills. And I mean, he gets to the rim well. He's not really a back to the basket kind of player. He really is. He plays like a guard. He shoots the ball well. Shot about 40% last year. Gets to the rim. Good rebounder. Good shot block. He averaged almost 2 blocks a game last year. So that also adds something on the defensive end, which Georgia also was lacking severely last year. So I'm very high on his potential. I just need to see it more from him at this level than I think I do from Thomason at this point.
Absolutely. Hey, Maddie, do you have anything that you want to tack on with the Thomason? And I'll jump in on the Sunahara with some additional thoughts. Love both those picks, by the way, Tyler.
Yeah, for sure. So, I picked Thomason much like I picked my other players to watch for our other team previews, mainly because he did great at his previous school, but I think there's a huge development opportunity when you take the coaching staff at Georgia and what Mike White's done with this program so far. Like Tyler mentioned, averaged about 48% from the field with 38% from 3. So huge shooter, definitely something that Georgia needed. If our viewers aren't sold yet, he was voted the Max Player of the Week twice last year and voted first team All-MAC after ranking number 34th in the nation and scoring at 19.5 points per game. So definitely, a big opportunity there for the Georgia Bulldogs to have their go-to scorer here next season. This is a very guard-heavy team, so it'll be interesting to see where he's going to be put in the lineup, whether that's going to be an automatic starter or starting to come off the bench. But I think we see some big opportunities here for Noah Thomason.
Yeah, I'm going to speak a little bit on RJ Sunahara's kind of the intangible things. I mean, he only went out and won a national championship at Nova Southeastern for the Sharks there at the D2 level. And then, let's look at the awards that he's got. National Player of the Year, Bebo Francis Player of the Year, the D2CCA South Region Player of the Year, the Sunshine State Conference Player of the Year. It just keeps going on and on. Owns a bunch of school records down there at Nova Southeastern. But what I really like is that he comes from a culture of winning there at Nova Southeastern, and that's something that the Dogs have not gotten a taste of for a while. No offense, Tyler, but when you bring that culture,
trust me, I know.
But when you bring that culture into a new team, it brings another level. Guys the guy knows what it takes to win, and hopefully he shares that culture on this team. That's something I'm very excited about. Comes in ranked number 50 according to On3 in the transfer portal. And the last very most important stat when it comes to RJ Sunahara, in my opinion, he's got the best mustache I've ever seen. That thing is it's horrifying. Like that thing is disgusting.
It's too good to be true. It's like, is it real? Are you sure?
It's like, what did you just take a Sharpie?
What's going on there, man?
It's so bad. It's so bad. All right, let's talk about the front court, guys. As we talked about, there's a lot of new faces on this team. But you got Russell Tetchway and in the front court from the southeastern corner of the Atlantic. People might know. I can't wait to see this guy. He's going to grab some boards, make Georgia more of a threat down low. Guys, what are your thoughts on the Georgia front court?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, like I said earlier, this team is very, very guard heavy. So I'm interested to see the influence that we're going to see from our 4 and 5 spots. I think, Mike White incorporated a lot of amazing pieces, not only when it comes to freshmen, but also from the transfer portal, especially. I'm going to absolutely butcher this name, but David put it in our lineup here. Chichua? Is that what we're going
So I
with?
looked this up like when we signed this guy. So I was like you. I don't know. I'm an idiot. I don't know how to pronounce this. Apparently, according to the UGA website, they do the pronunciation guide. It's Chiwa.
Okay.
Apparently, allegedly.
Okay, well, we'll stick with that for right now, for sure. But, I think he is a very promising transfer for Mike White, and I'm, like I said, super interested to see how this front court is going to benefit this Georgia team, especially when it comes to defense, because there were a few struggles last season on the defense end.
A lot. Yeah, I really like Big Russ. That's what we're calling him these days. It's just easier, right? Big Russ. Come on.
Big Russ works.
Yeah, 7-footer. I mean, he averaged a little under 12 points a game last year for South Florida, about 8 rebounds a game. It's also a guy that played, a lot of the big guys, you don't know, like, do the endurance, and they stay out there in the court for extended periods of time. He played over 31 minutes a game last year. So that tells me this guy can be a centerpiece in the middle of your defense. And that's what Georgia needs. Braylon Bridges was a solid-ish post score, did some good things, had some really good moments. But I don't want to call him a liability on the boards, but at times it kind of felt that way. He wasn't a big body, wasn't a physical presence down low. So Georgia honestly got pushed around the boards. And going and getting Chiwa, a guy that size and also the pedigree, having a lot of success at this level, I think that's a huge pickup for Mike White. I mean, he's not going to put up a ton of points. I wouldn't imagine he's going to be one of the top 3 or 4 scorers on the Georgia team this year, but that doesn't matter. That's not why you're getting a guy like that. You're getting that guy to play defense, to defend the post. You're getting to bring some physicality to the team, to the defense. And the other guy, I mean, he's definitely going to be the centerpiece there. The other guy that I don't want to overlook is Jalen Deloach. Now, he doesn't have the size of Chiwa, but this guy coming from VCU, starter last year, started, I think, all but one or two of their games last year. This is a guy that doesn't necessarily have the size and length that Chiwa has, but he has the toughness and the physicality. That's one of the many things that Georgia was missing last year. We just weren't tough. I mean, it's just the bottom line. We got pushed around down low, whether it's on the boards, defensively. We had no one that would intimidate anyone whatsoever. And Deloach is that kind of dog. Like, that is who this guy is. And he brings that toughness, that mentality that Georgia didn't have last year. So you have a big guy that can completely dominate the post with the size with Chiwa, and you have Deloach who's just going to do the dirty work and finish around the rim. You can get the putbacks and get the tough plays and tough boards. Those two guys, and I think that'll be the 1-2 punch down low. I mean, again, massive upgrade. It's just a massive upgrade for Georgia from where they were a year ago.
Yeah, you're talking about somebody who's 6'9", 220 pounds, came in and he could score. He absolutely can put points up. You're talking about 9.7 points per game. And then you got the great benefit of almost 7 rebounds a night coming from Deloach. Absolutely love the ad. Gives a lot more threat to the ability in the front court for the Dogs. Love it a lot. He's a great piece. You were talking about Big Russ, 11.1 points per game is nothing to turn your nose up to. And also a guy who's grabbing almost 9 rebounds a game. That's almost averaging a double-double. You got to love that in addition. And then we were talking about RJ Soonharder a little bit, kind of goes back and forth a little bit between the guard spot and the forward positions there. He probably might settle into a 3, but he's got some size. He's 6'8" and 205 pounds. And he was averaging almost 19 points a game for Nova Southeastern. Just want to see it on that next level to know like where he's going to be at in this league. And then we've also got 4-star number 75 player in the country, Dylan James, coming in. A little bit of front court ability. I know Maddie's getting right in her freshman 15 right now on Dylan James for the YouTube channel. Very excited when that one comes out. Guys, let's just to keep the pace here, let's move on to this backcourt. I know this is kind of the area we're all kind of super excited about. You've got Silas Demary, Blue Kane, Justin Hill, RJ Melendez. Tyler, what are your thoughts about this Mike White backcourt?
I'm excited. I am. Again, I same thing I say the front court. It's, to me, it represents a massive improvement over, maybe massive is not the right word, but a clear improvement. We'll see how massive it ultimately ends up being. But I go back to Kerry Oquendo. The guy was so tantalizing, man. The athleticism was there in spades, and you're just waiting for, like, eventually he'll figure it out, right? And he comes back. When Mike White gets a job, he gets in a transfer portal. You think he's going to go. Like, oh man, that guy could have been really good. He comes back, and you're really excited. It just never really quite translated at any point on the court for Kerry. And he's a good player. He's a talented player. He's going to Oregon now. We're actually going to play him game 1 this year.
We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, right out of the gate. So that'll be fascinating there. And I wish him all the best. I truly do. Talented player. And if he ever puts it together, that guy could be a lights out scorer. He just never had that game at Georgia. So I do think getting a guy in, like we mentioned, Noah Thomason, I think he's going to probably be in that lead guard. At point guard, you're going to have Justin Hill, who the back half of last year didn't start every game. So Terry Roberts was the guy for most of the year. He started off the SEC schedule with a bang, then gets injured, misses a couple of games. Justin Hill comes in and plays well. And then Roberts comes back. He wasn't bad. He just wasn't the same guy. So Justin Hill did play a lot more as the season progressed. I thought he did some really good things. He's not a great shooter, and that is certainly where his weakness lies right now. But he pushes the pace really, really well. He's a good ball handler. He's got good speed out there in the court. I think he sees the floor really well. He gets to the rim with, I don't say with ease, but he gets to the rim well. And he can also finish over bigger guys because he's not a big guy. So he doesn't have the shooting range that Terry Roberts has, but I think he does a lot of things that can set up the shooters that we did bring in last year. We didn't have those guys last year. It had to be Terry Roberts, so we just didn't have those guys. So I think having some more players around that can actually knock down shots is going to help mitigate some of the shooting issues that Justin Hill has. Maybe he improves a little bit this year, but he's probably not going to be a knockdown shooter. But I think he's a good point guard for this team. And you have guys coming off the bench. Again, I mentioned Blue Kane earlier as a freshman. I think he's going to get some time. Just come in and knock some shots down, man. Like when we're in a little bit of slump, put him in there, knock some shots down. That's what Jabri Abdur-Rahim does. I mean, that he is a sniper. That's what the guy does. Now, doesn't always hit him. Some nights he's really off. And it's like, just get him on the bench. We can't hit anything tonight. But when he's on, that dude is lights out. And he has those games, man. Every couple of games, like he just cannot miss. And so you need guys like that. You need those shooters that just have no conscience. And so you don't want those guys to start for you. Like Abdur-Rahim, great play, a good solid piece to have, not a starter caliber guy. And last year he's having to play more minutes than probably he should have as the season went on. I don't think that's going to be the issue this year. I think he's going to be a guy that can come off the bench with Kane and knock some shots. I mentioned the freshman. I think those guys also can come in and fill a role in the backcourt as well. So I'm really excited about it. I think just like with the front court, there's a pretty clear upgrade over the talent that Georgia had last year.
I feel it. I feel it a lot. You mentioned Terry Robertson there quite a bit, or a little bit in your chunk and your analysis there. Yeah, I'm going to miss talking about Scary Terry. That was fun to watch last season. But you're right. He had so much that he had to do on his own. Mm-hmm. Maddie, what's kind of your thoughts on just how much versatile this backcourt is? Because they've got a lot more pieces to choose from than what they had last season.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to say about the fact that pretty much every single person that we've pointed out that we're excited to watch this season on this Georgia team is a part of this front court. Like Tyler mentioned, we've got Blue Kane, we've got Noah Thomason, Silas DeMary Jr., RJ Sunahara. The list goes on and on. There are so many different ways that you can put this puzzle together if you're Mike White, with so much talent and, just versatility in that guard spot. Something I didn't mention earlier when we talked about Noah Thomason is, there were a couple videos that I watched that he's dropping dimes like Magic Johnson in his prime. So, you've got your shooters, you've got your assist guys. I'm just really excited to see what this Georgia team has to offer and bring to the backcourt.
Absolutely. I think you picked up my little bit of a curse there because you've been listening to me talk too much. Yep. You said front court instead of back court. I do it every episode. You hear me correct myself like crazy. I was like, hey, I'm going to get Maddie on this one. Guys, let's turn to the schedule here. Of course, we were talking about that Oregon game. T-Mobile Arena is where I saw my last basketball game of the season last year, live in person. But guys, this matchup between Georgia and Oregon is part of a doubleheader. It is the only matchup in the SEC featuring a P6 opponent versus the SEC. Thoughts on the Ducks for Dana Altman in Georgia's first game there in Las Vegas?
I think if you look at this, it not just the Oregon game, but certainly opening the season with Oregon, that's opening with a splash for Georgia. I mean, we typically don't have an opening game like that because it's just not where Georgia is as a program. I mean, I just got to be honest. But I think when you look at that game and some of the other games that Mike White has put on the schedule, we've got Georgia Tech, Wake Forest at home, playing the Baja Mar Challenge, playing Miami to open that game, to open that tournament. Then you also have the inaugural ACC SEC Challenge playing Florida State. This is a challenging non-conference slate for Georgia. Now, this is me reading into this probably way, way too much. But something tells me if Mike White was willing to play a role in building a schedule that challenging in year two, that's another reason why I'm cautiously optimistic about Georgia's chances to do something this year, is I don't believe Mike White would be okay. And I know there's other factors than just what does the coach want, but that also is a factor in this. That tells me that Mike White believes in this team, thinks he has a pretty good basketball team this year. Otherwise, why are you doing that? Like that's not, if you don't think this is the team that's gonna be better than what you had last year, why are you playing those games? Now, maybe you just want the exposure. Certainly that could be a part of it. But I mean, if this is the team that if you have designs on taking that next step and going to the tournament, which is why Mike White was brought in. That's why Mike White was brought into this program. Why are you playing that schedule? So I think, to me, again, that's reading way too much into it probably, but I take a little bit out of that.
No, I get it. No, you're exactly right. There's a lot of P6 teams in here that you're just going up against constantly. It feels like, and the Baja Mar is going to be no joke down there in the Bahamas. I'm with you 100%. Yeah, it's going to be a super, super tough one. Real quick on opening night, I love this game. Dana Altman and the Ducks last season missed the tournament. So both these teams are looking for their chance to get into the tournament. You mentioned Cairo earlier, and the fact that, he transferred to Oregon. It's going to be an exciting night for that game. So the Georgia's, like you mentioned, refusing to start the season out easy, and they play a second P6 team on Friday there in Athens against Wake Forest. Deacons last year finished 500 in conference play in the ACC. Rothstein is starting Wake Forest out way down the power rankings in the ACC at 12th. He's got them actually behind Louisville, if you can believe that. Any thoughts on that game coming up?
That's a game. The game got away from Georgia last year, but for the first half of the game, I thought Georgia was kind of in it, and it just got away. Last year, I don't think Georgia was there. I mean, clearly was not there at that point to be able to win a game like that, especially on the road early in the season. I had no expectations going into that game. I was actually mildly surprised early that we just weren't getting blown out right off the bat. And then, of course, it kind of ended up how I ultimately thought it would go. I think at home, that's a game that Georgia could potentially get, because I mean, the Wake Forest is losing a lot of talent off that team. Over the past 2 years, they've been a good basketball team under Steve Forbes. It's been a really good basketball team, and he's kind of re-energized, rejuvenated that program, kind of like we're hoping Mike White would do with Georgia. But he's certainly in more of a. I think Georgia's in a better place coming into this year based off the talent that Georgia has brought in. Mike White's brought in. And you look at the talent that Wake Forest has lost. Still, Forbes is a really, really good coach. In fact, when we were in that coaching period, that transition, trying to hire a coach, that was a guy I was strongly looking at. I was like, hey, this is a guy I would take him in a heartbeat. So he's a really good coach. I have a lot of respect for him. But if you look at what they lost from last year and what Georgia has coming in from the transfer portal in year 2 of Mike White at Georgia, I think there's a good chance that Doss can knock off the Deacs at home.
Absolutely. Maddie, any thoughts on the Wake Forest game? I know we were talking about him last night in our Florida preview.
Yeah, we talked about Wake Forest a little bit with Florida, and as high as I am on this Georgia team with their talent, with what Mike White's done in the program, I think this is going to be a pretty easy win for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Okay, we'll move on from that. Before Georgia, do what?
I said I want to believe.
I want to believe. Everybody wants to believe right now. All right, before Georgia heads off to the Bahamas, they will, of course, take on North Carolina Central, but we're not going to preview that game too much. I think we're all penciling in a W right now if we're looking at our sheet. So let's head to the tropics. Georgia headed to Baha Mar Hoops, Bahamas Championship, their MTE this year. Dogs will play 2 games in the Archipelago. Game 1, they'll face the Miami Hurricanes, who, of course, made the Final Four last year, and then they will face either Providence or Kansas State. Guys, this is not an easy trip for anyone going down there. What are your thoughts on this MTE? Because it's no joke.
Maddie, you want to take that one?
I mean, I will. I'll let the Georgia fans bite my head off.
I don't want to talk too much. I want to let you,
So, I mean, starting off against the Miami Hurricanes, kind of like Mike White, they've been a building team, but they've started putting the pieces together and figured it out, obviously, last season. I think that's going to be a rough one for Georgia, but I think it's going to be the game that we really see what this team has, and sets them up for the conference season before it gets going. I think, the second one, Providence or Kansas State, definitely more of a game that people should be interested in watching than the Hurricanes game. But, I feel like we can at least see Georgia go 1-1 here in this tournament.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Maddie, on that. I don't think Miami's going to be quite at that same level, but they're still pretty darn good. You're talking about Nigel Pack, 13.8 points per game, Poplar, 8.7, and then you're also talking about Matthew Cleveland, who just transferred from Florida State there, 13.8 points per game. It's going to be a good team, but Larenga's a good coach, so I don't know how great Miami. I mispronounced his name probably 30 different times on this show. It's one of those spellings, and I've heard it too. That's what's really sad. But he's got a good team, and he's consistently one of the better coaches that has constantly built this Miami team up. It's going to be a really tough matchup. I cannot remember for me the life, but I know that Providence has a new coach this season. It'll be interesting to see how year 1 goes there. They just lost their coach to Georgetown. Who is Providence's new coach? I'm looking that up real fast,
English?
Tyler.
I
think you're right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Tyler, if you have any thoughts, by all means.
Yeah, I think we're going and playing Miami in that first game. We're going to that game with house money. I have no expectations to win that basketball game. If we do, fantastic. But I don't expect to. I mean, you mentioned the names of Norchad O'Meara is also back. So, I mean, you've got some players that have big time tournament experience, Final Four experience, that played at a high level for Miami all of last year. Larinaga is a really good coach. My guy's been around I feel like he's like 9,000 years old, but the guy just keeps going and keeps coaching, man. He just does a heck of a job.
Oh, he does.
I don't expect to win that game. Can Georgia win it? Yeah, maybe, possibly, if like every ball bounces our way, possibly. But again, I have no expectations. Now, the Kansas State game, if we get, whether it's Kansas State or Providence, Providence lost a lot. So I I think Georgia has a fair shot to beat Providence. I mean, it's a basketball school. I mean, that's what they do. They play basketball at Providence. Kansas State, huge run last year. Keontae Johnson was just an absolute monster for them. They're losing a lot though. They have, Tomlin's coming back. They have some role players coming back, but the lead players are gone. So that's another game. I think reasonable for Georgia to compete in that game. I can certainly give the Dogs more of a chance to beat either Providence or Kansas State than I would Miami. So again, I'm kind of like you, Matty. I don't expect Georgia to win the first game, but I think they can get the second one. So if we come out of that tournament 1-1, I'm a happy man.
Tyler, you were right, by the way. It is Kim English, who is the new head coach there at Providence. And you're right. The Tang Gang lost a lot there at Kansas State. So it's going to be an interesting year to see where they're at. But, he had a great year last year, putting together some transfers. We'll see where Kansas State puts themselves this season. He has
that big time recruiter reputation. So, he's probably going to reload some way.
I know when we did our Big 12 SEC challenge, the guys from the Big 12 podcast were just super hyped on Jerome Tang. They love everything he's doing out there at K-State. All right. Before the Dogs get to the SEC challenge, or SEC challenge, they'll play Winthrop and Athens. Winthrop, a team that has not had a losing season in their conference in over 8 years. Eagles are known to be a pretty tough major mid-major out of the Big South. Could the Dogs be a little fatigued getting back from the islands? Possibly, but I think we're all penciling W's in. Everybody in agreement with that?
Yeah, that's a pesky team. That's one of those teams, like, you don't want to, like, why are we scheduling that team? Is there not someone else that we can get? But yeah, hopefully we should win that game. Hopefully.
Yeah, it's a quality opponent to face to help your resume out just a little bit, that you're not expecting to be really a resume helper there. Should be a decent team out of Winthrop. All right. Then, of course, Georgia, they're going on to the SEC title game, or SEC challenge. I don't know why I'm having problems speaking today. Georgia will face Florida State. Thoughts on the draw? Florida State kind of just been in a rocky spot the last couple of years.
Yeah, this is a team that for a couple of years there was at the very top of the ACC. We're talking Duke, North Carolina. Florida State was right there. In fact, ahead of North Carolina and Duke for many a year. Last year was somewhat of a surprise for me. I thought, because I just come so accustomed to Florida State being a good team, being a tournament team, being a dangerous team, a very talented team, and always a deep team. Always played so many guys. But last year, that came out of nowhere. They just completely bottomed out last year. I mean, if it wasn't for Louisville in the conference, you're talking about Florida State is like the what is happening with you team in the ACC. So they were kind of fortunate in that regard that Louisville existed last year. I have a hard time expecting that to happen again, though. I know they kind of remade the roster. Matthew Cleveland, who I thought's a really good player. I don't think he was the problem last year, but he's transferred out. We talked about him moving on. I think Florida State's going to be good. They always have talent. Leonard Hamilton does a great job there. But again, I think Georgia has a chance to compete. It's another game I don't expect Georgia to win right now. But I think Georgia has a chance to win it. It's because in the past couple of years, if you asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I'm like, there's no chance. Georgia's not going to win that game. Like, why am I even watching this game? But I would. But this year, I think there's a chance. I wouldn't say the Dogs are going to win, but they got a shot.
I would agree that they definitely have a shot to win this. Maddie, any thoughts real quick on Florida State? Of course, they may or may not have Primo Spears. He's still waiting on his NCAA waiver to clear.
Yeah, so I remember we kind of touched on the ACC SEC challenge in another video earlier this year, and I was impressed with the quality matchups, not just because, you have great teams against great teams, but I feel like they kind of played to the strengths of each team, and I feel like Florida State and Georgia is going to be a great matchup just because of the talent level of the team. Like Tyler said, Florida State's gone down a little bit in recent years, so we'll see what they're able to do this season. But as far as some kind of, talent equity, I think it'll be a solid matchup for the Georgia Bulldogs.
We will see how that one transpires. All right, let's move down the list just to keep the pace here just a little bit. December, they kick off the months with Mercer. Don't think we have any concerns. Everybody good with that? All right. Then the biggest game of the month happens in Stegman. December 5th, mark it down. Georgia will play longtime rival Georgia Tech. Tech projected 13th in the ACC power rankings right now, according to Rothstein. Guys, thoughts on the longtime rivalry? I know this was an extremely close matchup last year for the Dogs. What are we thinking about facing Tech?
Cheat out of that one. Horrible call in the game. It's okay. No big deal. It happens sometimes.
Happens.
I think this is a game Georgia wins. Georgia's going to win. We need to win this basketball game this year. That it has to happen. Like you said, very close last year. Questionable call at the end, but hey, they lost. Fair is fair, right? But this is a Tech team that, was not good last year, but also was sneaky good at times. It was a weird team. Like, they weren't any good really all year, but at a couple games, like, okay, this team is actually not bad. So it's a strange team. They're losing some talent off last year. Kawasi Reeves coming in from Florida, transferring. That's an interesting get for them there. I thought there's maybe a chance that he might try to come to Georgia. Obviously, the Mike White connections of going to Georgia Tech makes sense. Like, some connections there. And that's a guy at Florida, though, that was always talented. A lot like Kerry Oquendo. Really, really athletically gifted. You see the talent there, and you're like, I think you should be a more consistent player than you are. And he was a good player at times. Just wasn't necessarily, I think, what he could have been with the athletic ability that he has. So maybe he turns it on at Georgia Tech and becomes that kind of player. Kyle Cervic comes back for them. But this is a team, again, that lost a lot. I think that Georgia, if you look at Georgia's roster right now, what they've done in the transfer portal, I think they did a better job in the portal in the offseason. I think their roster's in a better spot this season. And get the Jackets at home. Georgia needs to win that basketball game.
Yeah, you're talking about the losses there. They lost Javon Franklin. They lost Devon Smith, Rodney Howard, and Jalen Moore this season. But, Maddie, they got a bunch of new faces that are also coming to the team. Amari Abram, who we're familiar with, who played for Ole Miss, and then Reeves, who played for Florida. They got some new additions. What are your thoughts on Tech before we move on here?
Yeah, again, you love a rivalry game any way you can get one. I think the fact that it's in Stegman this year is huge for the Bulldogs because, the fans are going to show up and show out for, a chance to see Georgia against Georgia Tech. Those new additions to Georgia Tech, I think, are going to be solid and something that the Bulldogs will need to watch out for. But when it comes down to it, playing the home crowd. So I think it'll be interesting to see Stegman rock for that game.
I will say, I know Stegman Coliseum is not always full. Let's just be honest. It's not. But for games like that, and when it's a big game, and that's a big game for Georgia, like you said, Matty, Stegman can get rocking. It can. It just doesn't happen all the time.
I forget the fan who's dressed in the sweater. I know we've talked.
Sweater Man.
Do what?
Sweater Man. Yep.
Sweater Man. He's dancing over there at the sideline. Plenty of energy out there. Yeah. All right. So after that Tech game, that may or may not turn into a Q3 matchup. One you absolutely need to win if you're Georgia and want to go dancing this year. It's very important that you beat Tech. All right. So after that, Georgia finally gets to host a bunch of mid-majors to make their corrections and get themselves right for conference play. They got High Point, Mount St. Mary's, North Florida, and Alabama A&M all at home. Look, do you think we just finish here with a little bit of a winning streak before conference play?
Hopefully.
Yeah. We're on agreement. Okay, cool. We'll move on here. Let's turn to the conference schedule real fast. Dogs got Arkansas twice. They got Auburn twice, Florida twice, LSU twice, and South Carolina twice. At home, they got Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Texas A&M. Then on the road, they got Kentucky, Mississippi State, Mizzou, and Vandy. Guys, thoughts on the conference schedule?
I think it can't ever be favorable because, you're going to play every team. Some of them you play them twice. I like Georgia's draw. The teams they got twice. LSU is still a work in progress. We'll see how they look this year, but they were kind of right there with Georgia. They were one of the worst teams in the league for much of last year, and they'll probably be better this year, but I still need to see that from them. So getting them twice, I think, is a little bit of a bonus for Georgia this year. And in conference now, you want to get as many Q1 opportunities as you possibly can. So there's that too. You don't want to lose any of those games, but always having Florida. Florida, though, I think right now is pretty comparable to where Georgia is right now. Florida, obviously, traditionally with basketball, far superior to Georgia when it comes to their basketball history and success, obviously. But if you look at where they are under Todd Golden right now and where we are with Mike White, I think it's pretty comparable where these teams are. I know they were a little more successful than Georgia was last year, but I don't think there's too much of a gap there right now. So I think the way it laid out for Georgia in conference, I think, again, paves the way for Georgia to have a shot to make a tournament bid. We'll see.
I think you're mostly right. There are like one or two stretches in there that are going to have me sweating. Like, you know what I mean? Like just a little bit. Sure. Like I'm looking at this one like around the turn of February here. You got South Carolina, but then you go to Mississippi State. Mississippi State's going to be a much better team this season. Yes, they've done a lot of good work in the front court, and things could be rocking in the hump if they're feeling some basketball out there. Then you're going to Bud Walton and Fayetteville, and then you're turning around coming home and playing a much better Florida team, and then you're going to Nashville, which say what you want about Vandy's roster. Jerry Stackhouse,
he's got it rolling, man. Last year was
he gets his kids ready to play. Yeah. So like that's going to be a little bit of a pull your hair out.
That's a weird place to play.
It is. It's the weirdest gym in basketball. Yes. But yeah.
I mean,
But
it's,
Matt,
it's the SEC schedule. I mean, the SEC is, such an underrated basketball conference. I mean, I think maybe it's starting to get a little bit more respect, but come on, I mean, that is, there's very few gimmies on that. So even South Carolina, Georgia has struggled significantly with South Carolina. For a couple of years, could not beat them. And South Carolina wasn't good either. Georgia just simply could not beat them. So, I mean, there are no necessarily any real layouts. I mean, LSU at home, you would like to think that's a game that Georgia can win. You would like to think South Carolina at home is a game Georgia can win, but there's no guarantees there.
I agree. We're going to see how much this team's improved. I think they can beat LSU and South Carolina, but we're gonna see where the improvement level is. Maddie, any thoughts on the conference schedule?
Yeah, I think, barring Arkansas and Auburn, I think the Dogs definitely got the best home and home schedule out of the SEC. And really at home, looking at Alabama, Tennessee, it's obviously going to be much easier to play them there rather than on their home courts, as well as Texas A&M. And then on the road, obviously Kentucky's always going to be hard in Rupp Arena. But then, Mizzou and Vandy, like I said, kind of weird ones to play in. But I think, as far as it goes, they got a pretty lucky draw when it comes to SEC scheduling.
I don't
you
think
mentioned Arkansas being obviously that's tough getting them with home and home there. But again, that's Q1. It's a potential Q1 opportunity. We're probably not going to win in Bud One. I don't expect that to happen. But can we maybe some way find a way to upset Arkansas at home? Yeah, I think there's a shot. And any kind of Q1 opportunity Georgia has, I'm going to take it. So I think, getting LSU and then Arkansas, I know is a much different story, but those Q1 opportunities at home, hey, take your shot.
That game for Arkansas that's going to be in Steg is January 10th. Now, historically, Eric Musselman's been a little bit of rocky at the beginning of January when it comes toward to conference play. So maybe that would be a really good opportunity to grab a Q1 win if you're the Dogs, because you would expect Arkansas to be somewhere in the top 30 in the net at any given point during the season. So maybe a really good chance to still a quad one for a transfer team that hasn't been put completely together yet. Put that on the radar. That does make sense. That's a really
always young guys and always the transfers. I mean, big time guys, but it's early.
It's early. You got to make chemistry happen at some point. All right. So here we go. Here's the numbers. It's not where I thought I'd have Georgia, as high as I've been on Georgia all offseason. But I've got Georgia at 18.5 wins. Are you guys taking the over or the under? And before you answer, you typically need 19 wins to make the NCAA tournament. So over or under?
I'm going to go back to what I said at the outset. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think 18.5 is a good number, man. That's a really good number. I think the Dogs can get to 19 or 20. I think they'll be on the bubble for most of the year. I don't expect this to be like a shoe-in tournament team. I don't think it's not a 4 or 5 seed team. That's not happening. But can we be on the bubble all year? Honestly, if Georgia's on the bubble, I'm a happy man because that's progress. That is progress for Georgia. And I don't expect to go from where we were to being like a surefire tournament team in 1 or 2 years. Can we get to the bubble this year? Find a way to sneak in. Hey, if we're playing in Dayton, I'm all about it. I'll be there, man. I'll be in Dayton. Let's go. So I'm going to go ever so slightly over.
I like it. Maddie, your thoughts?
I'm going to go over as well and clock the Dogs at 19 wins. Like Tyler said, I'm pushing for the bubble this year. I think that they have a great opportunity to make the tournament.
All right. So, all right, let's talk about our ceilings, our floors, our expectations for this Georgia teams. Tyler, we'll let you go first on what you're thinking. Where do you got everything for the Dogs this year?
All right, I'll start with the floor. I don't see how this team finishes worse than last year, barring a significant rash of injuries. That's always possible. Things happen. I mean, it's the SEC, as I said, it's an underrated conference. It's a tough conference. It's a really tough non-con slate. Well, it is tougher from compared to last year's non-conference slate. So if Georgia does go under 16, that's why, in my opinion. I think they'll finish better in the SEC. I think they'll surpass that 6-win total from last year. Non-conference, we'll see. It's challenging. But I do think that the floor, I'm gonna say 16 wins is the floor. I don't think they go under where they were last year. Ceiling for me, I 22 wins is the ceiling. I don't think they get there. I really don't. But that's assuming that everybody's a home run. That's assuming like Thomason's a home run, Sunahara is a home run. Defense improves dramatically. And like Georgia just hit on everyone that they brought in from the portal, and things just click right away. If that happens, it has to click right away. There's no like, hey, we'll figure it out in February. That's not gonna. You're not getting 21, 22 wins if you do that with that schedule. So if things click right away, the chemistry's there, and all these guys are who Georgia hoped that they would be, who all Georgia fans hope that they're going to be this year, then maybe 22 wins would be the ultimate max ceiling for me. But I think that's a bit of a stretch.
I like that take. Maddie, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think this team has a fantastic opportunity to prove that they're more than just a developing team and that they're on their way moving up the ladder. With the coaching and the pieces talent-wise, I think they're going to make the tournament this season and make it past the first round in their ceiling. I think looking at the floor, this Georgia team finishes slightly behind the middle of the pack in the SEC, maybe around the 8th spot, but obviously giving fans a lot more optimism for the future. Kind of similar to last season, just a slow build there. If you're looking at, the worst that this Georgia team's going to do.
So I'm vibing slightly different. I'm a little bit closer to Tyler than you, Maddie. But I think this team got better. I wouldn't have been so hyped about talking about, like, this is the team, when we did the Arkansas preview, I said that wasn't the team I was most excited about. It was Georgia. And this is why, because I don't know what's going to happen. And that's awesome. Because there can be super exciting this year for a floor. Yeah, sure. I'm with Tyler. Somewhere around like that 17, 16 wins. I don't think this team regressed in any way. Is it a tough schedule? Do you have a lot of P6 opponents that you're playing throughout the course of non-conference? Yeah, things can go sideways, but I think this is an improved basketball team. And so I think the floor is a little bit higher this season to where you're sitting at that 17, 16 win mark. For the ceiling, they get in comfortably into the NCAA tournament, probably rock a 7 or 8 seed. To me, that would be the absolute ceiling for the Dogs this year. But where I'm kind of thinking is that somewhere between 9 and 11 seed, they could end up being a first 4, as Tyler was talking about, or they could be fighting for, or end up with a high seed in the NIT. We'll see. But to me, this is one of those 3 teams I've been talking about all offseason. They're one of those 3 teams that I've got lumped in, and who's going to be that 8th team to make the NCAA tournament this year, because that's where I think the number's at. And I think Georgia, Mizzou, and Florida are all going to be fighting for that 8th spot. And I'm higher on the Dogs than some people are, but I do like the chance to Georgia to get in there. And like Tyler said, I'm going to love it if they're a bubble team. They're going to be super interesting all throughout the course of the month of March. All right. I want to thank Tyler so much for coming on the show. Tyler, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you at?
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on today. You can find us anywhere you get your podcast. Glory UGA podcast is the name of the show. Apple Pod, Spotify. You can follow us online on Twitter at Glory_UGA. Find us at Glory UGA podcast on Instagram. Also have a YouTube channel. It's just a Glory UGA podcast YouTube channel. And we have some content there for you. We obviously have you on football right now. When basketball season rolls around, we're going to have some basketball content on there for you, some film study, all that good fun stuff for you guys. So check it out.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to talk about football when you're talking about Georgia.
Right now we got to, right? Basketball, it'll have its day, okay, right, in the sun, right? It'll have its time. But right now, it's football. But I'm super thrilled to be able to join you guys. It's actually fun talking to basketball because we don't get to do it enough in the Georgia fan base.
I get it. It used to be for a long time over here during the dark days here on this side of Arkansas, on this side of the conference.
Yeah.
It was got a little bit dark, talking about basketball for a while, but then when Mike Anderson came along, it really changed things up. So I get that vibe. It's a rebuilding process, and it's going to be awesome to watch Georgia get back to a little bit more where they were, because they should probably be somewhere in the middle of the conference. Definitely better than Ole Miss, 100%, given the history behind Georgia. No offense to our Ole Miss listeners, all 5 of you. But sorry, that's my fan base to pick on right now. But man, it was awesome having you on the show today.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, guys. It was fun.
All right. So next time on the show, we'll be joined by, that's wrong, because we're actually releasing that episode before this episode now. Thank you, my life, for getting super busy and for our editing. I believe we will be having Maggie Johnson from Mizzou. That's who next on the next episode. And she'll be, of course, talking about the Mizzou Tigers, an interesting team to talk about this season. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot more basketball to talk about before, this season ticks off. So we will see you guys next time.